right. Hello, everybody. I think we are streaming live. There we go. So welcome to Q&A with Red River Leadership. My name is John Dahl, and this is Nolan Weisz. Oops, he's on this side of the screen. I was pointing that way. This is Nolan Weisz. And we just thought it would be really important and beneficial for everybody. We work with churches across the nation, answering questions and specific site-specific details and questions that churches are having in terms of worship, in terms of technology, just how to do things the best we can as the church. So we thought it'd be really cool to have a Q&A each week where we just go live and we have a conversation and take questions from people, from churches, things that you're dealing with. So I invite you to put any questions you have in the comments below, any things that you're running into specifically, and we'll try to get those questions as we go. So we have a couple questions that have kind of come up in recent Zoom consultations that we do and trainings that we do with churches. So we're just going to name a couple of those for today and walk through kind of what we've learned along the way and kind of go from there. So one of the first questions we want to start with is just kind of the elephant in the room. The kind of the biggest one that we've seen come across recently has been, okay, so we got pretty good at doing church online during COVID. How do we now transition to online and in person? And there's a variety of ways to look at this. There's a lot of different ways that people are doing this. So I think I'm going to bounce it to Nolan here right away and just kind of get your thoughts on what online has become and what it's looking like, and how we can best be moving and preparing now to be back in person. And we know that a lot of churches are already in person, and that's all right. So kind of how they've done it maybe, and what we can learn from that as we prepare.
Yeah, and it's crazy. I think that this whole pandemic has really showed many churches that online should have been around for a long time if it hadn't been already. Connecting with the people who are homebound, connecting with people who are outsiders to your church, not just all of a sudden, instead of just connecting with your church members who are in close enough of a radius to get to church every Sunday or whenever you have worship services. And now you can be not just a church for your denomination in your small part of the world, but in your small part of that town, but you can now be a church for the world, for anybody, for the outsiders, for not even just Christians, but people who have not heard the love, the word of God for them. So, and I hope you're in that place where you had to do this because of the pandemic and restrictions on how many people could meet. And now it's like, well, as we do get back, and you might be a church who is back in person already, and maybe you're like John and myself, where we're not back yet, but it is going to happen in the future. But we don't want to go back in a way that feels like we're going back to normal. We've created this new thing. We're connecting with people in different parts of the nation, in different parts of the world. But how do we do that? Because we don't want to take away from the quality of what we've done online. Mm-hmm. And previous to COVID, we would live stream our services, and it was working. It was fine. You know, the people who weren't able to connect with us in person that week were able to watch at a bird's eye view, and it was okay. It was good. But it was always like, in person is our campus. It's our main campus, and online is that thing we do for the people who can't make it. And we've quickly realized that now we have two campuses. We have in person, when that happens again for us, and online, treating them as two different worship campuses that are happening sometimes at the same time. Mm-hmm. And there are a lot of different ways to do this. It's not a one size fits all. Right. And John and I have had a lot of different conversations about that, how it's going to look. And I don't think that we have the answers necessarily, but we'll talk about a few different options. One of them is live streaming your service. And we have some tools on our website for that, how to do that well. We have been fans of Switcher Studio, which works with iPads, relatively cheap, very simple for the average volunteer after a little bit of work, and you can connect with us for us to help you train you through that. It's worked really well.
Oh, I think you're breaking up a little bit.
We'll be going is we're going to, all right, awesome. Fun.
About the last 10 seconds, I think.
Okay. So if you have any questions about Switcher Studio or a quick, cheap way to get your worship service streamed online, let us know. Another way you can do it is have two different things going on. What you do in person and then doing something separate for online, which is the way that we're going, so that we can continue to have great in-person experiences and great online experiences.
Right. Well, and just to go on that too, as we've been digging into this, I learned that a lot of churches were doing that pre-COVID already. And to me, like I was kind of surprised to hear it. I mean, it makes sense for a lot of different reasons. And I mean, the churches with the teams and the resources and the staffing to execute that, that's great, and good for them for building that up when they did. But I learned that a lot of churches were already doing that they had been recording their weekend before, kind of fine tuning that, making sure it's very intentional for the online worshiper. And then that was the online experience the following week. Was a normal for a lot of different churches, and something I hadn't even considered. I think, I mean, if you're anything like me, and I know you are, Nolan, like we've kind of had the experience of online being the other thing we do, like the other way to do outreach. It was kind of the cool thing to try and do for a while, and it became a great way to outreach, to get things online, to reach worshipers like you've been talking about that are not in our communities, that are across the world potentially, to get the message of Jesus out further. And, you know, it was just kind of an outreach. It was looked at as outreach. It wasn't looked at as, you know, part of actually what we do and how we are a worshiping community. So I found that very interesting that was already happening before.
Yeah, it really opened up my eyes personally, just how many different people we can be connecting with.
Yeah.
We've had the opportunity to hear from people who are snowbirds. So that's kind of normal for at least this area of the world, that people leave for 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 months of the year.
Depending on winter starts.
Right, when winter starts and where you're heading or what your life looks like. And maybe they have a different church, but they miss their home church. And then you have, for us, this is a huge reality, is we have hockey families. And if you're a hockey family, or you know hockey families, they are not a lot around on Sundays for worship. They are traveling every week. And so our normal response was, yeah, you could watch our live stream and it's okay. And now we've worked so hard on dialing in this online experience. It will be like taking away a toy from a child, except this toy is the gospel, the message of Jesus Christ. So we really have to put some thoughts into it. And then those two examples were people who are already members or who are already connected with our home church. But there are people through the last 10 months of being online who have connected with us, who have never stepped foot in our building, because people are sharing our worship services. And so again, for us to continue to keep that quality the same, we've chosen to do it separately.
Yeah. And I think it's so important to keep at the forefront, you know, the why behind that, and just knowing not logistically, but just knowing in reality, how many people are just scrolling through their phones, they click on your video, they're like, oh, it's church, okay, you know, and is the video, I used this example the other day, is the video camera like pointed up like this, welcome to church, we're glad to have you, and God bless you for trying and doing that. And I mean, you're doing great, and that's not to bash that at all, but what it is saying we need to make sure we're intentional. and that you're framing in your pictures very well, that when somebody clicks on your video, it's not just the extra thing you're doing, not, kind of like I was talking about earlier, it's not just the other form of outreach that you have one person trying to do in the corner of the sanctuary, but that when somebody clicks on it, they can feel intentionally welcomed into worship, into a worship experience, and then can sing along with you, can pray with you, whatever it is. So I think keeping that why, like why we do this, like it's not just another thing, it's not just because it's a trendy thing for churches to do and for ministries to do, but the effect, the reach that the message of Jesus can have and can get out to is huge.
Yeah, another thing that has really been an eye-opener for us is that when you're in a live experience with somebody in the same room and you're worshiping with them, you have that back and forth. You have that intimacy, that relationship where you're connecting with each other and you're connecting with God. And when you do the live stream, you're busy doing your job, whether it's leading worship or serving communion or praying or preaching or whatever it is. But when it's online, you can't connect with those people the same way. So if you're doing live stream, you can't connect. But if it's pre-recorded and then produced out, then you can be commenting, you can be asking for prayers, you can be asking how people are doing, you can be posting funny pictures, whatever it is, a way to connect with the people who are not inside the building. And I've loved that every Sunday. When we do worship, I can be online and somebody says, I love this song, and say, yeah, this is where it comes from, or I wrote this, or have you checked out this song, or this is the Bible verse that it came from, or how can I pray for you today, whatever it is. And we have Katie Dahl, who's a magician at Connecting with People, who's the host every single week, connecting with people. And I just think that that creates so much value for the people who are literally across hundreds and hundreds of miles away, but you're in that same space in that worship together. And that's another reason that we love to have this produced online experience so much more.
Right. So that kind of brings up a couple things. I mean, there's major value there, something that you wouldn't even experience in person. If I'm in person worshiping at your church, Nolan, and you're up there leading, I can't say like, hey, how did this where did this song come from? How does this work? So the interaction that you're able to develop there is a whole nother level of worship. I mean, it's, yes, you want to be in the moment worshiping, but I think that there's so much value in being able to have those conversations live, and experiencing that moment together. I think that's really cool. So how do we take, what worship was before, in person only, and bring that value onto the internet, into a live experience, while also being able to create some of these new opportunities that technology allows for? I think that's kind of what it comes down to.
Okay.
We had a comment come in, words on the screen are so helpful so we can sing along. That's a big deal. I remember early on in my ministry, Good Shepherd had screens, but it was such a question of, do we need them? Like, do we really need screens up there? Do we need words available? Like, can we just pull out our books? Can we pull out our hymnals? And just seeing how that's evolved from those questions to where we are now, and how we've been able to, by putting in screens, create this technology, create a new system that puts screens up that are visible, that we can now take that feed and put it right into Facebook, or YouTube, or wherever we're streaming at. And similar to how we're doing this Zoom call right now, where it's side by side, you can see the worship leader or the band or the whatever on one side, you can see the screen on the other side. And one way we've been able to tackle that, just to get into nuts and bolts just a little bit, is Switcher Studio, which Nolan mentioned earlier. We used to use a program called Switcher Studio, which I highly recommend for churches that are just getting started and trying to figure this thing out. It's an Apple iOS based software that you can use for different iPads. And you have one iPad that can be your camera, and you have another iPad that works wirelessly with that iPad, that you can control if it's ProPresenter being broadcasted, or any kind of whatever you use for software to project lyrics up, can be added into the live feed. And just taking those steps intentionally of, okay, Why isn't our worship working very well online? Okay, words on the screen. That's a big barrier. That's a big thing. How do we get that done? Okay, we need a program like Switcher Studio. We need a program similar to that that's able to bring in ultimately two media sources to be able to bring that experience online. And I think it's so quick to be overlooked. I mean, that was when we were first trying it. We had an iPad in the corner of the room, and it was our big barrier. We're like, okay, this isn't working because just having an iPad in the corner of the room shooting the entire sanctuary doesn't, while it gets the worship experience online, it doesn't make it easy for the worshiper online to be able to engage and worship from wherever they're at. So it was starting to take those next steps of how do we do it, and that's when we found Switcher. And luckily, I thank God all the time that we started that transition 5-6 years ago of going, how do we do this well? And we didn't have to hustle into it when COVID hit. So I'm so thankful every day that we were able to do those things in advance and have the time to research and have the time to figure out what the best solution would be.
Yeah, that's good.
That all being said, too, if you're watching right now, we're super happy to help you walk through these things. If you want to set up a Zoom call with us, just like this, we can talk through the different options that are available to get this done for your church and to get it done well. And not only will we point you in the right directions and show you the different programs, but we'll train your team on how to use it and how to get it implemented into what you're doing.
Absolutely.
Should we move on to the next question?
Yeah, absolutely.
And again, email us if any of these things are ringing for you that you're like, oh man, we need to figure this thing out. Just shoot us an email. We'll get on a conversation with you. We'll get on the phone. We'll set up a plan and we'll go from there. So the next question, another question we had come in this week, earlier this week, was pertaining to audio. So we've been talking a lot about visual experience and kind of the maybe emotional worshiping experience specifically. But we had a great nuts and bolts question come in about our audio sounds great in the house, and when we're doing worship, it sounds really good in person. But then when I go back and listen to our live stream, our audio is terrible, and you couldn't hear this, you couldn't hear that. It was too echoey. How do we fix that? And I thought it was a fantastic question. Again, one of those steps that we just had to figure out along the way. Nolan, what have you found successful in that?
Yeah, I think there's kind of two different options for that, and especially depends on if you're doing the live stream in the moment or you're post-producing, which, John, you have more experience with doing in the moment, a separate channel on the board. So I'll let you tackle that one. For us, with the pre-produced one, we just take right off of the board into separate channels, so that it does, as long as you're getting an okay signal coming through, it doesn't need to be super clear, even, because you can adjust it post-producing. So I've got something called Reason. There's all kinds of different things out there. There's GarageBand, which is free. There's another one. I'll have to post this later. I have it saved somewhere that's free that you can get it online to mix the tracks. I bring the tracks into this separate unit, and then I adjust the levels. I clean it up. I get rid of the tracks in
how do you even get your audio into that? I mean, what's the very beginning steps of that?
Yeah. So now we go through our soundboard. In our worship space, we have our soundboard, and there's a USB out, and that goes straight into the computer.
So the same process ultimately as before, and now you're just recording all of those things into your already used system. So what you're already using.
Give me 1 second here, and I'll grab at least an idea.
Yeah. So we're just hopping on now. We're talking about how to make your online audio, your streaming audio, your online worship experience audio better or just as good as your in-person. The initial question was, our in-person worship sound is great. We've been working on it for years, sounds really good. But when we go back and listen online, it does not sound the same or nearly as good. So how do we fix that?
So prior to us using this worship space, we were recording in different areas in town. And this isn't the exact one, but it's called an audio interface. Whoop, there it is. So this one just has 2 channels, one for a microphone, one for a guitar. You can get it as many channels as you want. And so adjust the levels, there we go. And on the back, you have the this is all inverted. I haven't done this before. You have the USB from this into the computer, into the program. Like I said, GarageBand. I use Reason. Which one do you use, John?
I use Adobe Audition.
There's all kinds of different options, ranging in free to very pricey. So then I take them into that program, and like I said, I adjust how loud things are. You can do different effects like reverb, so how much space it sounds like. If I'm talking in here, it's pretty dead, so the sound doesn't really have anywhere to bounce off. When you're in a sanctuary, if you've been in any of those huge cathedrals and you sing something or you whistle, it starts bouncing off of the walls. So that's what reverb is. There's several different options for effects. EQing, how the highs and lows sound in each different track. So that's how we do it. And we'll be doing a class later on about how to do that a little bit more efficiently. It's not something that I can really dive in too deep right now on a quick Zoom call, but that is how I do it.
Yeah, well, and everyone's situation is just different. I think,
Right.
you know, if you invested already into a digital soundboard and have the capability to record all of those tracks, if you will, and each track is your voice, the different vocalists, your pastor's mics, your guitar, piano, drums, whatever you have for worship, recording those all individually through your board onto a computer, and that way you can mix it specifically for so the process that's happening in house is they're mixing it for the in-person experience. You're mixing the different levels as you go. But then what we're talking about here is pre-recording everything. After it's done recorded, you do what's called post-production mixing, where then you adjust the audios and then you can add that into your video and put it up from there. So in person, then what I'd like to talk about too is, so that's one option, is pre-recording, mixing down, posting that pre-recorded experience. The other option then is when you're in person and you have one person dedicated to mixing your house, you need to have another person, and we all love finding volunteers in church. So I know that right away it's like, oh, another person, we just found Dean, you know? But if you find another person, this is just something you have to invest into and take the time to train somebody up, to have somebody mixing the in-person experience intentionally, and then somebody also mixing the live experience while it's happening. So typically what we would do there is we have a digital soundboard, so we're able to run it both on the console itself and then also on an iPad on another device. And so we have somebody that mixes that audio specifically for the online experience. And what that takes from a gear standpoint is you already have all the gear you need ultimately, but what you need to do now is you need to have one of your other outputs being directly fed into your live experience, and that output is being mixed specifically by somebody else. So it's a pretty easy thing overall to implement. I think we put that on a pedestal, like, how are we going to do this? This is a big deal. But finding, do you have another output you can use? If you do, getting that fed into wherever your live stream is going. If you're using Switcher Studio, getting that audio connected directly into that iPad. If you're using any other way to go live, making sure that that direct audio is coming in. And to make sure I don't skip over it, encouraging you to, if you're doing live and you have a sound system, make sure you're getting your audio from the microphone, from that sound system directly into your live feed. We've had a lot of questions come in where Churches have started live streaming, but they just pick up what's in the room. They just pick up, based off of that iPad, right? And that's why it's so echoey, and you don't hear things directly, and you can't hear very well. So just making sure that you have direct audio is what we call it into your source, your streaming source. And then anyways, back to the process. So having somebody then mixing that specifically, and I usually have, whether it's me or anybody on our team, step outside the sanctuary, listen to the Facebook Live. Okay, that sounds pretty good. That sounds good. Oh, that person's way too quiet. I gotta go, and then you have your iPad there to be able to mix that. So hearing directly, if your stream is on your phone, pulling it up, listening to it, and then going back in and making the adjustments you need to make. It's great to monitor. What's that?
What do you do if, what do I do if I don't have a fancy board that does that?
Yeah, then, it really comes down to, and a lot of analog boards, some of the older boards have separate outputs, separate bus channels. So it's checking your board, checking with your sound person, and going, okay, how many outputs do we have? Do we just have our left and right main output that go to the speakers in the house? If you do, okay, then it's probably time to start looking at investing some dollars into a better board, a more versatile board where you're able to have more outputs. And that's something we can help you with. We can guide you on brands and which people to go through, the whole thing. But if you have a board that already has that, then you're able to start working on these processes. And what I would do is just have the conversation with your sound person right away. They'll know right off the bat, yep, we have this available. And then it's just kind of the how to put it together. So reach out to us with questions there.
John, I think I found, so we talked about Reason, we talked about GarageBand. There's another free digital audio workstation, which is what I do the producing part in, and it's soundbridge.io. So there you go, free.
There we go.
And for lessons and quick how-to videos on how to mix, post-produce worship, contact us.
Yeah. There's, we did Adobe Audition only because we had already invested into the Adobe suite where we had Photoshop, where we had Premiere Pro, whatever else they have, whatever. But if you have Adobe already, you already have Adobe Audition. And you also have Premiere Pro to help you with your video editing and things like that. If you have a Mac, GarageBand already comes with it. So you already have these ways to do these things that are already in your tools. And that's been a big thing for Nolan and I, especially as worship directors. Like there's always the want to, like, we got to buy the best thing, the newest thing. It's like, no. There's already things that you have that you don't even realize you have, maybe. That you can be doing a lot of these things with already. And it might be just taking something you bought years ago and retooling it a little bit, getting in a different position in your workflow and figuring out, okay, this is how we can get this done without having to spend a lot of money or any money at all.
Yeah, because ultimately we all want to be good stewards of our money.
Yeah.
And by our money, I mean of God's money. We want to make sure that we're faithfully using those dollars. And sometimes you do have to upgrade or buy a new soundboard to get what you want, so that the mission, the word of God is spread as far as possible. But let's make sure that we're using everything we have available to us at the time.
I had a kind of along this line, I had a question come in this week. A church reached out and said, we just had this big donation come in and we know we want to invest in the technology and into church online. How do we do this? So we started working through exactly what they would need. And as I was getting to the audio part, he's like, oh, our soundboard is terrible. And I was like, okay, then these dollars that you had initially thought were going to go to kind of the video experience, the broadcasting experience, are going to have to first be spent on getting that audio situated. And we're working through that. We're kind of figuring out what the best way forward is going to be and what the dollar amounts are. But that is a big piece of it. I would never tell you, yep, but here's the switcher program you're going to want for live streaming. You're going to spend $12,000, let's say, on this. You get it all in, you get it all set up. Nolan and I come out there and set it up with you. We work through with you on Zoom, whatever it is. And then you do your first stream and your audio is terrible. Well, shoot, we should have spent some money first on getting that audio situated and fixed, because that's ultimately going to make your in-person experiences better too. If your audio gear is currently not working well for your live stream, well, then I bet it's not working very well in house. And how do we get these things cleaned up that are going to bring the most amount of value possible kind of as you go?
And just to clarify, the Switcher Studio is not $12,000.
No, Switcher's not.
Example.
Switcher's much cleaner or cheaper.
Yeah, hundreds of dollars, thousands of dollars.
Yeah, Switcher Studio.
I just wanted.
Yeah, no, that's good. Switcher's definitely something I recommend, especially if you can't spend a lot of money and you want to get this thing up quick. Switcher's very user friendly. I still use it for certain projects. If we're outside, we use our Switcher Studio program, and it works really well. And that used to be church entirely. And then this year, our church said, okay, what's this going to take to do this well and clean and set us up for the future? And I just thank God that conversation came along, and we were able to make some of those decisions.
Right. Well, good. So, we got through both of our questions for today.
Yeah.
And if there's any other questions, or you want to dive deeper within these two questions, reach out to us. We're happy to help however we can. It's been just a blessing for both John and I to be able to work with different churches all over the place and help them do the best that they can in their context. And we're here for them.
Times are changing, church is changing, and we need to just not be afraid of it. We need to be excited about it, jump on the opportunities. Yes, sometimes it takes money, as things always have, and a lot of it, I want to encourage you, don't put it on a pedestal and be nervous about it. Reach out to us, figure out exactly what steps you can take. I think that's the hardest part. In my journey early on, I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. So I reached out to a ton of different churches. What worked best? How did you do this? What tools did you use? Which programs did you use? And slowly but surely, we were able to just upgrade baby steps as we went, learn about the things we needed to save money for, what things we already were using that we didn't realize could be used in different ways, and just kind of piece it all together as we went.
Yeah, I think it's safe to say that we're just in the beginning stages of what online worship, what the internet, what technology is going to do with and for the church. It seems like it's so big because there's so much you can do, which is true, but we're only at the beginning. We've only just started. And so we can be stubborn about it and just not change and not figure it out, or we can embrace these tools, the technology, to follow the mission of Christ, to connect with people on all ends of the earth.
Yeah. One other question just came in. Do you recommend doing test streams when we get new equipment? If so, how do we do that so the whole congregation doesn't get a notification that we're live? That's a great question. I think there's a couple ways to do it. My first thought is don't go live. If you're working through audio, if you're working through different ways to do video, don't go live, just record it. See if whatever it is that you're using, your new equipment has just a recording function. And I would just go live or hit record and do some tests, have your band play, have your pastor in there talking, or whatever it is. I mean, you can work through that as you need to. If it's just you, hit record, go up there as if you're the pastor and use the microphones and the gear you're using, record it, pull it out, play it back, listen to it. Okay, that didn't work very well. Make the adjustments, record it, do it again. As for testing the actual live, there are ways. In Switcher Studio, for instance, they have a test stream, I think it's called, button that instead of like going live, you can do a private stream right onto your page, where then only you and the other admins, if you have other admins on your page, can see it. You can do a test stream, pull up your phone, your other device, whatever it is, see how it's looking, how it's working. But yes, definitely don't go live to your church. We've done that a handful of times where we'll go live on something and then we're like, oh shoot,
another option. Yeah, another option for, that works perfectly, and that's something I understand now. A few years back, I probably wouldn't understand that. So what we have done is have a private group for your tech team and do it live to there. So only the few people in your tech team can see it.
Yep. Early on, before I knew there was the test stream function in Switcher, I just started another page. I made another page called Dahl Media or something, and then we went live to that page only, and I had 0 followers on there, so it worked out perfectly. And then I made whoever was working, our tech guy at the time, another admin on the page so we could both see it. So create another page, go live, make a test page for your church, whatever you need to do there, Facebook and YouTube alike, and then test things out. I think testing is huge. We've spent so much time. I'm really glad you brought this up, Ryan. We spent so much time in our church testing stuff, trying stuff. Did this work? Did this not work? And the biggest thing is always, well, we only have so much time in the week. Yep, I get it. But if you spend the time up front learning, testing, trying, failing over and over, you're going to slowly start dialing in what that online experience is going to be. So just make sure you take the time to do that.
Exactly.
Cool. All right, well, we'll leave it at that. Thanks again for jumping on today. Here's our info. I'm going to share it on the screen. We do training, consulting, coaching, resources. We created the digital hymn library, which Nolan has put a lot of work into this last year to make worship easier to get online for whatever church you're with. They're downloadable lyric videos, so you can use them for in-person and for online. And we've gotten a ton of feedback that churches just love them and use them every week. So we encourage you to check that out if you're struggling to find musicians or struggling to get lyrics on the screen like we talked about. This can be a solution in a lot of different settings. So check out our stuff, redriverworship.com. Email us with any questions you have, redriverworship@gmail.com.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
Thanks for joining us. Bye-bye.
Bye.